When I say who is HeatoN, most people are going to think, well, I mean, everyone knows HeatoN, especially even modern day people, even people who are only in CSGO. You've seen HeatoN, he's like owner of NIP or involved in NIP somehow. He's always there at the events. He's like a figurehead person. And that's the thing. In theory, he's like the most famous Counter-Strike player of all time. Definitely one of the most successful ever, especially for his period of time. Like during those first sort of 3 or 4 years, by far the most successful. Those CPL tournaments, CPL were the best tournaments. They had European tournaments, and then they're like 2 tournaments in the summer and the winter in North America, which were they were like 2 majors. So overall, CPL tournaments, counting European ones as well, he finished top 4 in his first 11 CPLs, covering like 2001 to 2004. He finished first in 9 of those CPLs, and 4 of them were like the majors, the big NA ones. And he won the World Cyber Games in 2003, the gold medal. So by far one of the most successful players ever. Now, if you look at his prize money earnings on the earnings list, it's not going to be that high, because back in those days, you only tended to have like 2 or 3 majors, and then tier 2 events, you'd only have like 3 or 4 at most in a year. It wasn't like later on in CS, like the Navi Fnatic era, where like there might be like 13, 14 events, and you'd have all those majors, and like, yeah, there was a big spread. You could win a lot of money by getting a lot of top 4. So at the time, he was like by far, him and Potty were the 2 most successful players ever. They'd just won almost everything. They'd had, as a combo, they were always the ones who were there at the top on the podium at CPLs. Now then, when you set it up like that, it's going to sound like, right, well, it fits into the stereotype of what people are going to think of as HeatoN, because a lot of people would say, like, oh, wasn't he the best player ever in CS, or isn't he like top 2 or top 3 of all time? That's where it gets a bit trickier. So, oh yeah, another thing they accomplished, I should mention as well, is in 2003, when they had this really dominant year with SK Sweden, when from once the period they got Element onwards, they only lost 1 map out of like 42 played or something ridiculous, and just stomped all these tournaments. So that year they made the prize money record for money won, which is about, I think it was like about $150,000, I think was about the amount. Now then, I'll take you back in time to understand who HeatoN is. So in the early days, we're talking like 2001, beginning of 2001, he gets brought into the NIP team, and he's playing with names who are significantly more famous and considered better than him, and were better. So was Potty. Potty was like the original god. He was just like the super all-round player, the amazing clutch player, one-man army, could just take over the whole game. You had HeatoN, who around the summer of that year was just like, godlike. He was just amazing rifle skills, could use every single weapon. Really skilled player. You had Executor, who was like, his aim didn't look that good, but he was just a LAN monster. Like the big pressure games, he could just dominate the whole game. So you take these players and then you put HeatoN into the mix, and he's just like a rising star at this point, Equivalent to the period, he was like what Simple was when he joined Hellraisers. He's joining a team with more famous names, but he's like the rising talent. You can see that he's really good. And the thing was, in 2001, HeatoN was very good. He got super good towards the end of that year. His whole style was to spray the whole time. And yeah, later on, people would spray a lot, and in general, in CS, spray at the time was used quite a lot, but still, some people would burst, some people would tap a little bit, like Potty was more that style. He would like 2-bullet tap you with the AK. HeatoN just full auto sprayed the whole clip, no matter where he was. And the thing that's important to notice is, back in CS 1.3, which is when this was, before 1.5 came out, and they skipped 1.4, by the way, that was just like a beta version. 1.5 came out like a late spring, early summer of 2002, I think it was early summer. That really nerfed spraying. Like, you could still spray a lot, but what they did is they purposely put it so that sort of in the middle, say like the 7th or 8th bullet, it went a bit random. Like, it had a very random like thing to it, and then you had to like pull the controller back again. Whereas before that, spray was more like, it was like continuous. If you were really amazing, you could spray a lot of it really accurate. So as a result, HeatoN could do this spraying, and he was the best at it by far. He had by far the best intuitive feel for this spraying style. He'd practiced it a lot, where he could spray you like medium to long range, and he'd get the headshot eventually. It was really impressive, and he was dominant in this era, and he was up there with a Potty. Like, listen, Potty was still the closer, he still won the 1v1s, he's still the all-round player, but HeatoN was the one putting the numbers up. And so here's the crucial thing about him. During this era, this is where his name's established. This is when he became the most famous, and part of the reason why is sort of like what I call the boxer effect. And so I'll explain it like this. In StarCraft, Brood War, everyone's heard of Boxer, right? If you've even played StarCraft 2, you've heard of Boxer for sure. The South Korean player, Lim Hyo-wan, the most famous StarCraft player ever. Even now to this day, people think of him as like a hero, legendary player. And so you might naively think, if you don't come from StarCraft, oh, he must have been the best player ever, must have won the most ever, must have had the most skill ever, must have created everything. No. If you were to make a list of the top 10 players of all time in Brood War, he'd be on the bottom end of the top 10. He wouldn't even be top 5. There's so many great players after him, players who won more, who did more, who were way better at the game, who even beat him. He wouldn't be up there. But the key thing is, the reason why he's still thought of that high and why he has that crossover appeal is because the timing of when Boxer came out in StarCraft Brood War was early on enough in the game that the game's still getting big, and then as it's starting to get big and they're having these big tournaments, like over there it was the OSL, obviously in CS we had CPLs, he wins the first couple of big ones, and his style is very creative and it's fun, so newer players gravitate towards it, and so it's the perfect storm of everything, like the timing of the game getting big, people wanting a hero to cheer for, fan favorite style that's like pleasing, it's not like a very boring style or a safe style or like just execution, just all go balls out, and as a result it gets a massive groundswelling. He's more popular even to this day than some of the great players after him. Same thing with HeatoN. He did have the 6 skills early on, just like Boxer was very good in 2001, but it didn't matter that both of them fell off a little bit in later years. They'd got the perfect time to sort of rise to the top. Like every factor was there to make them a star, and so they became the biggest stars. They were the biggest names. They always associated with their game. So that's what happened in CS. Every fan saw this new rising star, and he had really sick aim, and they were all over him, and he was winning all the tournaments. And yeah, he was the one that they gravitated toward. They didn't look at Potty because it was a bit more subtle what he was doing. Medium was like just because he was such an all-rounder, he was doing everything everywhere, and he's switching positions. That's a little bit more difficult for the average fan to understand. They didn't understand the techniques that some of these players were using, so they looked at HeatoN, had everything. It was like, he's just like them. He just sprays all the time. He goes all out. He goes for every kill. He's the young guy. I mean, he was only like 18 at the time when he was winning these tournaments. Yeah, it's obvious as to why people would gravitate towards this player. And yeah, he was at one point in a very brief period of time with Spray, if not the best, he was like top 2 or top 3 in the world for sure. He was up there at that level. But after the Spray got knocked off a bit, that's the thing. After that, he immediately took like a level down. He's one of those guys who never fully recovered from that switch over to the different Spray because it wasn't as effective then. And so as a result, he was still really good. Like at the time, he was still a top 10 player for sure. And his team continued to win more tournaments. In fact, they had the most successful periods, some of them after that period in time. But at that time, it relied on having more players across the team. Because when the Spray got nerfed a bit, overall the individual game got nerfed. Before then, people like Potty, Executor, they really could be like one-man armies who could just win a whole game themselves. If they were just on their game, you couldn't beat them, no matter who was on your team and who was on theirs, almost. Whereas in the later days, after these nerfs, and we went into 1.6 and 1.5, in these versions, it was more team play. Now, because the individual impact was a little bit reduced, you needed to have a good team as well. You needed to have the right star players on your team. That was the thing HeatoN had later in his career. So yeah, he won a lot of titles after that, but it was also because he had great teammates. He had Element, who had amazing sense for the game of where to be, and quite a good tactical read of the opponents. He had, well, Potty, obviously, who I think top 3 of all time for me is Potty. He's amazing. He had Potty as a clutch closer. They had Spawn just to give raw fragging power. Spawn was kind of like the Neo HeatoN. Like I don't think Neo, the Polish man, I mean Neo instance, like the new HeatoN. Like he was the guy afterwards who had the spraying style and he had the really sick, racking up lots of kills. Spawn kind of came in that, and that's why Spawn's so popular as well. People always think he's like a top 5 player. For me, I wouldn't put him that high, you know. So then we had Spawn was in his team as well. He had Al, was like the ultimate support player who did all the dirty work. At times he had players like Hib, who was amazing AWPer. They had all these great pieces around them, and this is what allowed them to be such a great team going forwards as well, even after individually now he wasn't like a top 3 player in the world. He's maybe like top 8, top 10, around this level. And then as the years went by, he dropped down a little bit more. Like once you go to like 2005, 2006, the end of his career, now he's just a good pro. He's not amazing, but he's good. He's still competing. But now, you know, now he's like top 10 in Sweden, you know. Now there's a lot of great players come after him, like Hyper. Later on you have Zet, Falle. You have all these good players who come along, Robban even. So now his level isn't quite as high. He's not a superstar anymore. So the main thing to understand about HeatoN about that is it's not that his reputation is overstated. There was a time when he was the best and he had all the skills and the whole package. And naturally, like I said, the young rising star, great style for fans to watch. Like I have to say, it was really entertaining. His demos, particularly, that's another thing to mention. Actually, back in those days, then demos weren't released by tournaments. You couldn't get POV demos from like a big CPL type tournament. So it was entirely at the player's discretion if we released a POV demo. And at the time, before like 1.6, HLTV was really bad actually. It didn't show like the gun model. It just showed like a crappy crosshair, and eventually they added a gun model aspect in, but even then it wasn't very accurate with the spray and it wouldn't show the recoil properly, so it was really bad to watch. You could watch it just to enjoy the game, but to appreciate the individual skill was very hard. So as a result, if players released POV demos, then they would be eaten up by the fans. People were dying to see a Potty demo or to see a K-Sharp. That people would go crazy. So as a result, people like K-Sharp and HeatoN, who released really good demos, they didn't ever release crap, just like amazing demos of themselves, they became super popular because the fan would see this. And particularly, another secret was HeatoN did the right thing in terms of he released some games of him playing public mode and just destroying people. Back when, like I said, the individual aspect was really strong, so he could just go like 39-2 on this public server and kill every single person. And also, so as a result, if you're a fan and you see that and you don't understand the difference between pro play and just fun play, you're going to think he's like the best player ever. No one can ever touch this guy, and he can play like that in every pro game. Whereas, not really. Like he gets some of those kills, but he won't be like dominant in that fashion. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I can't believe I forgot to mention this, a key round that made HeatoN super famous. So even though he had this 6-star really good spray towards the end of 2001, where we're still back in 1.3 and he was an amazing player, his actual play in the big CPL tournaments wasn't always that sick. He'd have like the big frag halves, he'd put up the numbers, but it was always like Potty was like the closer. He would win like the 1v2 or the 1v1 or whatever else. But there was a game at CPL Winter 2001, and this was the first really major tournament for CSGO, because at CS 1.6, CS, well, it wasn't 1.6, it was 1.3, CS 1.3, because this is the first tournament where the first place prize was $50,000, and the whole tournament was like, I think 150k, maybe 200k prize pool. So the winner was going to get 50k, so everyone was watching this tournament. And there's a game in the upper bracket when they play against 4 Kings, and in this game, they lose I think it was the second round, they lose the pistol round, and so on eco rounds then, you almost never won them, because your weapons were really weak, and then even though they'd have like MP5s and stuff, they were just going to kill you for sure. And famously, on Aztec, HeatoN went under the river area and he hid behind this wall here, and that's now known like a famous spot, everyone checked it after that. But the 4K players run by, and he pulls off this amazing round, which you can definitely find if you Google like HeatoN 4 Kings, where with a USP, he fully ecos the whole team. He kills the first guy, he kills the second guy, he gets that guy's gun, he gets an AK, he kills like the third guy. It's the fourth and the fifth kills that are insane. I think it's the fifth one is the craziest, because the fifth one's the one where he kills him looking across over to like where the bridge room exit is, and he shoots that guy where you can only see a pixel of the guy's foot. He shoots him in the head through the wall. And HeatoN even said himself, like he made a joke, he kind of like facetious, well not facetious, but he kind of like exaggerated it by saying, oh, God took my hand in that moment and directed me. Like, yeah, obviously he didn't, but it was a really amazing round. And even though that wasn't like the biggest game of the tournament, like 4 Kings finished like 9th to 12th of that tournament, that wasn't like the biggest game, but to be like the young guy, the new star, going to the biggest first major tournament, and you have that round that everyone remembers and everyone made clips of, well, that's what makes you like a legendary player. And famously, a UK player, because he was a rival of 4 Kings, made a clip of that, and he got that clip of the HeatoN 1v5 versus 4 Kings, and he put the music on it, Chesney Hawkes, the one and only, that cheesy like one-hit wonder from the UK from like the 90s. And because he put that on, that's where the nickname came, that HeatoN was the one and only. That's where later on they made that movie with that title. That's where a lot of it came from. So you can see not only the perfect like style for fans, perfect timing on when to rise, perfect team to be on, everything flawless in terms of like to make you the star player, the face of CS. But then you even have a key round like that in a huge tournament that like will never be forgotten. That's like even brought up now as one of the best rounds ever, and it was even to this day, and you'll never see it, almost never a better round than that. The level of skill was amazing. So that's who HeatoN is.